kind of where it started was, I remember in undergraduate school in a abnormal psychology course. Now I never trusted authority ever.
Yeah.
I was raised that way.
Yeah.
It was just in my blood. I didn't trust authority. So I went into psychology. What I hated about psychology was that except for experimental psychology, you could not test out anything that they were saying.
Right.
You had to just take it as at face value. These scores of courses, all this information that they were making you memorize and spit back to them.
Yeah.
You you had to take trust them, and that was the truth that they were telling you. I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. And you could not get access as an undergraduate to any psychiatric institution. Even as a graduate, in graduate school, I could get into a prison with the professor's help, but they would not let you into a psychiatric institution. They would not allow you to investigate. They want to keep it secluded. It's like a secretive society run by the psychiatrists. Researchers are not permitted. Okay? So I came in from the inside, which is
Right.
really the only way you could get in there.
Yeah.
So I had to jump through all those friggin' hoops to get in there. You know, undergraduate school, graduate school, PhD. You had just to get in the door.
Yeah.
And then they figure if they let you in there, okay, you're brainwashed enough to believe all the crap that they taught you.
Yeah. If you made it this
You know,
far, you're probably
you
towed the
made it
line.
that far, you're brainwashed. I mean, you're gonna run the program. You're gonna behave like they want you to. But in undergraduate, I remember they the professor gave us a paper to read, and basically what it said was that if two psychotics met each other and they both thought they were, Trudeau, one of them would have to give way. One of them would have to change and say, well, okay, you be Trudeau, I'll be George Washington, or something like that. I read that and I go, even as an undergraduate, at 19, 20 years old, I'm like kind of going, well, why would that have to be? I mean, why would one crazy guy have to change because another crazy guy had the same identification? That,
Right.
that doesn't make sense. But there was no way to check it out. So fast forward probably another maybe 10 years, I was on the second floor of a big psychiatric institution. I was making my rounds, and I saw this guy. I was starting to notice that the voices that these people were hearing weren't, verbal cabbage. I mean, they weren't just, nonsense. What it sounded like was listening to somebody on one side of a telephone conversation. They were carrying on coherent conversations with somebody I couldn't see. Now I could hear their side of the conversation. I could hear the arguments.
Yeah.
I could hear the voices getting loud. I could hear them getting upset. But it was very difficult to try to get close enough because when you got close, they'd shut up. Okay? So I was on the second floor of the Whittle building at that time, a psychiatric hospital, one of the psychiatric units I was assigned to. And I saw a new guy on the floor, and it was my job to kind of keep an eye on everybody in that institution. And anybody was going, we were like spies for psychiatry. If anybody was losing it, we would have to snitch them off to psychiatry, and psychiatry would drug them. And that's all we knew back then. That's what we were taught. That was the only remedy. That was the only treatment for psychosis, was to have the psychiatrist drug people. You don't, and you could see that regular counseling didn't work with these people. I mean, you could talk yourself till you were blue in the face. It didn't have any effect on them. It was like shooting a rhino in the butt with a BB rifle. Talking to them didn't faze them. There was no logic. Whatever was driving them just blew past any kind of talk therapy like it was hot air. Nothing. So the only thing that we had that worked were the phenothiazine, these heavy-duty major tranquilizers.
Mm-hmm.
So I was making my rounds on this unit, And I saw this one guy, and he was walking through the day room. He was talking to his voices. You could hear one side of the conversation. So I kind of snuck up behind him, trying to, okay, what's he saying? And when I got close, he caught me. So he turns around, he's looking at me, and I said, "Oh, I'm Jerry. I'm the psych for this unit. I haven't seen you here before." And I said, "What's your name?" And he says, "I'm Jesus Christ." And I look at him and I think back and I go, "No, no, you're not Jesus Christ, because I am." And I'm sitting there going, "Okay, now what's he going to do?" I was thinking back to what that abnormal psychology paper told me years ago. I said, "Is there any truth to this?" I finally had a chance to check it out. So I'm waiting. I'm sitting on pins and needles, waiting for his reaction to see if he would change from Jesus Christ to somebody else. And he's standing there and he's looking and he's thinking. His eyes are cocked up, and then he thinks about it, and then he looks at me and he goes, "We can both be Jesus Christ." And he strolled off. I went, "Okay, they lied to me about that. What else did they lie to me about?"
Right.
So right away, my suspicion had increased, and I'm on the lookout for other stuff. So one of the things they told us was that the voices were hallucinations. Okay, they hammered that into your head. They're hallucinations. They're hallucinations. They're hallucinations. No research. Nobody studied it. Nobody did any studies on it. The psychiatric mafia just went, "We hereby declare that they're hallucinations because we said so."
Yeah.
I didn't trust them any more than I did anybody else. So, when I saw that these so-called hallucinations were running patterns, and two of those major patterns, the two first that I discovered, were that they were consistently negative.
Mm-hmm.
What held them negative? Why were they on a constant negative trajectory? Why weren't they random like hallucinations? And then the other question was, what held them on that negative trajectory? Why weren't they random? I didn't know back then. All I knew is that this was a consistent pattern. They were consistently negative.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're consistently negative, what is holding them on a negative trajectory? Right? The second thing I saw was that they were anti-religious. They didn't like the Bible. They didn't like preachers. They didn't like the church. They didn't like anything spiritual at all. The patients who I started questioning patients who went to church because they felt like something's wrong, something's evil, something's bad. I'm going to go to church and see if I can't fix this. Those people who decided to do that broke into three different sections. If the voices were weak, when they entered the church, the voices would shut up. If the voices were moderately strong, when they went in the church, they would kick up and try to drown out everything the preacher was saying. Okay? If they were very strong, they would actually drive them out of the church. These people will get up and run out of the church. Okay? So why would a hallucination be anti-religious? Why would a hallucination care? Okay? Those were only the first of 23 that popped up over time. And all these patterns are on my website under articles. So what the psychiatric mafia did is first they blamed it on mothers. They said, "Oh, the mothers screwed something up. They did something to make their sons or daughters psychotic." And the mothers went, "Hey, we didn't do anything." So that was visible. So what they did, the psychiatric mafia and big pharma, they kicked it up to it's a genetic disorder. They got away with that for like 10 years until the geneticists caught up with them and said, "We don't find a schizophrenia gene.
Yeah.
There is none." So then they needed to have some reason because they didn't know what caused schizophrenia. They didn't want to see what caused schizophrenia. They didn't even want to look there. They were making billions of dollars selling their antipsychotic drugs. They don't want a cure for schizophrenia. They have reduced research into schizophrenia down to a dribble. They're making $14 billion selling these toxic antipsychotic drugs right now. They don't want a cure. All right. So it was easy to debunk the mothers. So they kicked it up to a place where 99% of the population could not investigate genetics. You had to be a biogeneticist in order to debunk that. It took a decade or so, but they finally did. We don't find any genetic gene. So then what they did was said, oh, well, it's a combination of genes. Like, well, we don't see any combination of genes either. So that fell by the wayside. So then they had to find something else that they could put as a cause that people couldn't look at. You know, you have how many people are geneticists, and of those, how many are wanting to look into schizophrenia? Very few. So they got away with that for a decade or so. So then they came up with the biochemical imbalance. Okay, that was come up by Eli Lilly,
Yep.
a pharmaceutical company. You know, back when Prozac came out, it was completely fabricated. It was made up. They knew it was a lie at the time. They put it out anyway.
Yep.
So now the universities and big pharma ran with it. They're still putting that out. You know, they're still in their advertisements. You know, here's one I got. Here's one I printed out not too long ago. Matter of fact, it was August 5th, 2023. So now this is from a major publication. Okay, Cleveland Clinic put this out, and it's what causes schizophrenia and does it have any triggers? You know, one of the first things they list: chemical imbalances in your brain. The chemicals involved are those in your brain that are used to communicate. This has been debunked years ago, and they're still publishing it. It's ridiculous. These people are scammers of the worst degree. You know,
Yeah,
that,
and what's interesting is schizophrenia isn't the only disorder that's followed that pattern, right?
no,
There's
no,
many
it's
where
all mental illness.
yeah.
All mental illness. Now, Ronald Pies, this is one of the top researchers in psychiatry. He says the demise of the chemical imbalance theory in view of the mounting evidence against it after more than 20 years of being told the chemical imbalance in the brain causes mental illness, such as anxiety disorder and depression. The theory was finally put to rest when Ronald Pies, the editor-in-chief emeritus of the Psychiatric Times, stated in July 11th, 2011, I believe it was, issue of the Psychiatric Times. He said, I don't believe I have ever heard a knowledgeable, well-trained psychiatrist make such a preposterous claim that mental patients have a chemical imbalance, except to mock it. In truth, the chemical imbalance notion was always a kind of urban legend, never a theory seriously propounded by well-informed psychiatrists. And then he goes on to other people say, Harvard, the chemical imbalance theory is a sort of last century thinking. Neuroscientist Joseph Coyle of Harvard Medical School says this. You know, the truth is that they don't have any idea what the chemical balance of the brain is or even what it should be. You know, so here's some of the top people in the field saying this is a bunch of bunk, and here's the Cleveland Clinic still publishing that mental illness is due to a chemical imbalance of the brain with no evidence whatsoever. Okay.
Wow.
So what I noticed when I was on the front lines was, okay, if the chemical imbalance, then the psychiatrist should be taking some kind of reference measurement. Right. Like, okay, if there's a chemical imbalance of the brain, what's out of balance and how much? You know, there should be some kind of blood test or EEG or EKG or some kind of hardcore scientific diagnostic test to measure what's out of balance and by how much. I never saw one. Never did I ever see a psychiatrist. And even today, you know, those of you who believe this chemical imbalance lie, if you go to a psychiatrist, you watch and see if he gives you any kind of test to see what's out of balance or by how much. They won't do that. They'll look at you. You'll come out of that psychiatric office with some kind of drug that has toxic side effects, but you won't see them take any kind of measurement as to what biochemicals are out of balance or by how much, because they don't know. They don't even know what the chemical balance of the brain should be. It's a fabrication. It's a lie. It's a deception upon the entire planet.
Yep.
You know? And they're getting away with this.
Yeah.
You know? So that was the first thing I noticed.
Yep.
That didn't make sense. Okay, if it's a chemical imbalance, why aren't they taking some kind of ground measurement? Why aren't they taking a baseline of some kind? It's just not happening. So I asked one psychiatrist one day. I said, where's the baseline? How come you guys aren't testing? Oh, the drug companies do that for us. It's already handled. And I'm like, in the back of my, I'm thinking, what is the matter with you? That's like letting the fox loose in the hen house. What are you thinking? Of course, I couldn't say that to them because they're so friggin' arrogant, they'd go nuts. So here's all these things that are not lining up. They're not making sense. So that was the second one. So the voices are running patterns. This biochemical imbalance thing isn't making any sense. This genetic theory was debunked a long time ago. The bottom line is they don't know what causes schizophrenia. They have no idea. And they're not looking into the voices, which are the main symptoms of, it's one of the main symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia, one of the most common types of schizophrenia. They're not even looking at it. And they won't let anybody else. I got in trouble twice when patients told the psychiatrist that I was asking them what their voices were telling them. I was called up and I was ordered to stop asking them those questions.